Aside from gaining the right to vote, women were sexually liberated, which caused them to be independent without a husband. Women who were bold and expressed their freedom through their clothing and dancing were given the nickname flappers. The amount of women working in large industries increased by 25%. The reason women were able to start working was because of the work they did during World War I. Unfortunately, most women remained housewives and were dependent on their husbands. Despite all of the freedom and independence women gained, they still were not as free as their men.
During the Great Depression, women didn't have many problems they wanted to fix. What they did want, though, is more women in the office. They got what they wanted when Frances Perkins became Secretary of Labor. She was the first woman to ever hold a cabinet position. Ironically, Perkins advocated against married women competing for jobs. She called them selfish since they could be supported by their husbands.
Women primarily worked in service industries, and these jobs tended to continue during the 1930s. Clerical workers, teachers, nurses, telephone operators, and domestics largely found work. Other jobs through technology such as radio and telephones allowed more job opportunities for women in 1930. The Great Depression didn't affect jobs for women. Approximately 13 million women worked for wages outside the home role. Changes became the norm for women, coping with and adapting to the economic changes brought on by the Great Depression. Although the Great Depression was an economic crisis, it served as an opportunity for women to be present in the workforce. Before the Great Depression, women furthering their education were slim. Women began to take their financial futures into their own hands, focusing on college and their future careers. Finally, the Great Depression forced women to make changes in how their families functioned, with men suddenly unemployed. They turned to drinking or abandoning their families. Altogether, women became the peacekeeper in their households to help all members of the family adjust to these new changes in society.
In conclusion, for women during this time period, they didn't have a tough time compared to the other groups. In the 1920s, they gained rights and a newfound independence. During the Great Depression, women's jobs weren't affected as much, so women were able to keep their jobs. Women held many domestic jobs like teachers, nurses, and clerical workers, but their downfall came after the 1932 election. Women wanted more women in the office, and they did with Frances Perkins as their Secretary of Labor. Her idea of no working wives was passed with the Federal Economy Act.